So what if everything you are seeing and hearing right now, like in this exact second, is nothing but a dream?
I mean, that is a profoundly disorienting premise to start with.
Right. Like what if you were walking around, holding a cup of coffee, driving your car, completely awake, but actually still entirely asleep?
Yeah. If you look around the physical space you're in right now, you feel the solid ground beneath your feet. You see the light coming through the window.
And your brain tells you, okay, this is objective reality.
Exactly. But the framework we are exploring today suggests that your waking life is just as constructed and honestly heavily filtered and often just as irrational as the dreams you have when your head hits the pillow at night.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
Because right now, your brain is running on an operating system you did not choose.
Not at all.
It is enforcing arbitrary rules you didn't write, and it's constantly punishing you for crimes you didn't actually commit. And today, our mission is to hack that system.
I love that framing. We are diving into the mechanics of human perception.
Yeah, through the lens of a really profound text by Don Miguel Ruiz called The Four Agreements. But I want to be clear right out of the gate here. This isn't some airy, abstract philosophical exercise. We are treating this deep dive as a tactical, practical guide to reclaiming your personal freedom.
We are essentially doing a full audit of your mental conditioning.
Yes.
Our goal is to expose these hidden, invisible agreements that are silently bleeding your energy dry every single day. Because once we see the code, we can rewrite it using 4 highly specific rules that really have the power to entirely dismantle the reality you think you are stuck in.
But to rewrite the code, we have to look at the source of the virus, right?
Yeah.
We have to understand how this false reality was built in the first place.
We do. And to do that, the text takes us back thousands of years.
Right. To southern Mexico, specifically to the Toltec.
Yeah.
We're talking about the area around Teotihuacan, which translates beautifully to the place where man becomes God.
Which is quite the title.
It really is. And it's important to note the text frames the Toltec not just as an ancient civilization, but as an elite society of scientists and artists of knowledge.
Yeah, and that's a crucial distinction. Anthropologically, we might think of the Toltecs as a specific demographic or empire, but the text clarifies that within this culture, there were distinct lineages of masters.
And Nagels.
Right, the Nagels and their apprentices. And their entire societal focus was the exploration, the mapping, and the conservation of spiritual and psychological knowledge.
But over time, that became incredibly dangerous, didn't it?
It did. Between the arrival of European conquerors and, frankly, the internal corruption of certain apprentices misusing this psychological power, the Nagels were forced to take their findings underground.
So they basically had to hide it.
Yeah. This ancestral wisdom had to be concealed and passed down in absolute secrecy over centuries.
Which brings us to the mythos at the very foundation of this entire philosophy. It's the story of the smoky mirror.
I love this story.
Me too. Because it feels like something out of modern quantum physics, just articulated 3,000 years ago.
Totally.
So the text describes a human studying to be a medicine man. One night, he falls asleep in a cave. He wakes up, steps outside on the night of a new moon, looks at his hands, and then looks up at the millions of stars in the crystal clear sky.
And then it just hits him.
Yeah, in that moment, he has a reality-shattering psychological break. He hears his own voice say, I am made of light. I am made of stars.
And the mechanism of that realization is what's truly staggering to me. Like, he doesn't just feel a poetic connection to nature. He has a real cognitive shift where he perceives that the stars don't actually create light.
Wait, they don't?
Well, in his realization, light is the fundamental substance that creates the stars. He sees that the physical matter of the universe is just a mirror reflecting light, and that the supposedly empty space between the stars isn't empty at all.
Wow.
It is teeming with life. It is pure intent. He suddenly grasps that human perception itself is merely light perceiving other light.
But the euphoria of that moment doesn't last, because he immediately recognizes the tragedy of the human condition.
Right.
He walks back into his village, he looks at all the other humans, and he literally sees himself in them. He realizes everyone is a mirror.
But when he tries to explain this,
nobody else sees him in themselves, and he realizes why. There is a wall of thick fog or smoke wedged between all these mirrors.
And that smoke is the core problem we are dealing with today in this deep dive. That smoke is what the text calls the dream.
The dream of the planet, right.
Exactly. It represents our endless layers of interpretations, our prejudices, our false beliefs. It's the rigid images we've constructed about who we are and who everyone else is.
So he literally calls himself the smoky mirror.
Yeah, as a reminder, he knows he is looking at himself when he looks at a stranger, but the dense smoke of societal conditioning prevents both of them from recognizing their shared essence.
Okay, I want to dig into the mechanics of that smoke.
Yeah.
Because no baby is born prejudiced. No baby is born with a crushing sense of inadequacy or like a fear of public speaking.
Definitely not.
So how does the fog get there? The text introduces this concept of the dream of the planet. The idea is that before you were even a thought in your parents' minds, the billions of humans who came before you had already constructed a massive, complex, collective outside dream.
It's all the rules.
Exactly. The rules of society, the laws, the religions, cultural norms, the exact definitions of what is beautiful, what is ugly, what is right, what is wrong.
It is a pre-existing psychological architecture. You are born into a world where the script has already been finalized, and the process by which this script is downloaded into your fresh, incredibly neuroplastic brain is described in the text with a word that is intentionally provocative.
Domestication.
Domestication.
Yeah, that word hit me like a ton of bricks. Domestication. Like a house cat or a circus animal.
It is meant to be jarring because the mechanism is identical. I mean, a human child's brain is an absolute sponge. We are born with the innate capacity to learn how to dream, how to perceive reality, but the giant, godlike adults around us immediately hook our attention.
Hook our attention, yeah.
Our parents, our teachers, our cultural institutions, they train us how to dream the way society dreams. And they do this using the most primal psychological conditioning available.
A system of punishment and reward.
Exactly.
Let's really break that down because I think it's easy to hear punishment and reward and just think of, getting a gold star in kindergarten or being put in timeout.
Sure.
But the stakes for a toddler are literal life and death. If you're a child, you depend entirely on these giant adults for your survival.
100%.
So when you do something that aligns with their book of law, say you sit quietly, or you get good grades, or you adopt their political views, they give you a reward. And the ultimate reward isn't a toy.
No.
The reward is their attention. It's their love.
Precisely. And when you deviate from the rules, the punishment is the withdrawal of that love. For a developing brain, the withdrawal of a parent's love feels like an existential threat.
It's terrifying.
It really is. So very quickly, the child becomes absolutely terrified of two things: the pain of being punished and the agonizing withholding of the reward.
And here is where the tragic mutation happens. The fear of not getting the reward distorts into the deep-seated fear of simply not being good enough.
That's the root of it.
We realize that our authentic, wild, natural self isn't acceptable to the giants holding the keys to our survival. So what do? We start pretending.
We build social masks.
Yeah. We become a carbon copy of our parents' beliefs and, by extension, society's beliefs. The domestication is so effective that our true nature gets buried under miles of smoke.
And the efficiency of this system is terrifying. The text points out that eventually, society doesn't even need outside authorities to control us.
We just do it to ourselves.
Yeah, the parents, the priests, the teachers, they can all step away. Because the domestication is so complete, we internalize the entire structure. We install what the text calls an internal regime.
Okay, this internal regime concept is where I started getting genuinely uncomfortable, because it maps so perfectly onto my own anxiety. Let's walk through this architecture.
Well, the internal regime has three main components. The first is the book of law.
Okay.
This is the master ledger of every single agreement you ever absorbed during your domestication. Every rule about how you should look, how much money you need to be considered successful, what emotions are acceptable to show.
And we just accept these.
Oh, completely. Anything written in this book of law is absolute, unquestionable truth to you, even if it violently contradicts your own inner nature.
Wow.
Then, the second component is the judge. The judge is the active program in your mind that uses the book of law to constantly evaluate and judge everything you do.
Everything.
Everything you think, everything you feel, and everything everyone else does.
And if you break a rule in the book of law, let's say the rule is you must always be productive, and you decide to take a nap on a Tuesday afternoon, the judge immediately bangs the gavel. You are declared guilty. Which brings us to the third part, the victim.
The victim is the part of your psyche that carries the weight of the judge's sentence. It's the voice that absorbs the shame, the guilt, the blame. It's the part of you that whispers, "Poor me, I am terrible, I am lazy, I am not worthy of love."
I am fascinated by the evolutionary, or really the psychological cruelty of this split.
Yeah.
Cause in the text makes this unbelievable point about the difference between humans and every other animal on the planet.
This is a wild realization.
Right. If an animal makes a mistake, or if a human justice system convicts someone of a crime, they pay for that mistake once. You serve your time, and the debt is paid.
Right.
But humans have these immensely powerful memory centers in our brains. So we're the only species that pays thousands of times for the exact same mistake.
It is the ultimate glitch in our cognitive software. I mean, imagine you make a mistake at work, you say something incredibly awkward in a meeting, the judge immediately finds you guilty.
The victim feels the flush of shame.
Exactly, the embarrassment. You pay for the mistake. But because of human memory, 3 days later, you were taking a shower and your brain replays the memory.
Oh man, I do this all the time.
We all do. The judge opens the book of law, bangs the gavel again, and you feel the exact same visceral shame all over again. You punish yourself again. 5 years later, you are lying in bed trying to sleep, the memory surfaces, and you punish yourself a third time.
And it's not just us doing it to ourselves. If you have a partner who operates under the same system, you might make a mistake, apologize, and pay for it. But 6 months later, during an argument, they bring up that exact same mistake,
Pulling you right back into the courtroom to be punished again.
This relentless, inescapable cycle of judgment and self-abuse is why the text uses a very heavy word, hell.
Yeah.
It suggests that hell is not some mythological destination you go to after you die. Hell is a literal state of mind that we are living in right now. It is a psychological environment fueled by the continuous fire of fear-based emotions, anxiety, jealousy, self-hatred, and resentment.
If you're listening to this right now, just think about how exhausting your own mind can be.
So exhausting.
The sheer caloric energy required to constantly maintain these masks, to feed the judge, to soothe the victim, and to uphold a book of law that you didn't even write.
It's no wonder we wake up tired.
No wonder at all. We are trapped in the smoke of a bad dream.
So the million-dollar question is, how do we get out? How do we stop the trial?
We have to write a new code. We have to make new agreements to systematically dismantle the internal regime. The text offers 4 specific agreements to do this, and the first one is the foundation of everything else.
Okay.
Without it, the other 3 are impossible, but it is also arguably the most difficult to master.
The first agreement. Be impeccable with your word.
That's the one.
Now, I want to stop right here, because when I first read that, I thought it meant don't swear, tell the truth, and use good grammar.
Right, like standard etiquette.
Yeah. But the text elevates the concept of the word to a completely different stratosphere.
It does. It requires us to understand that the word is not just a sound coming out of your mouth or a symbol typed on a screen. In this framework, the word is pure, creative life force.
Literal magic.
It is literal magic. It is the mechanism through which you translate the invisible energy of your thoughts into physical reality. What you dream, what you feel, what you intend, it all takes shape and manifests through the word.
But because it's a tool of creation, it is a double-edged sword. You can use your word to create a beautiful, supportive reality, or you can use it to completely destroy the world around you.
Exactly.
The text doesn't mince words here. It explicitly called the misuse of the word black magic. But to understand how to avoid that, we have to look at the phrase itself. Be impeccable. Let's break down the etymology, because it totally shifts the meaning.
Right. So impeccable in modern English usually just means flawless or perfect.
Like an impeccable suit.
Yeah. But it comes from Latin. The root word peccatus means sin, and the prefix im means without. So to be impeccable literally translates to being without sin.
And this is where the philosophy gets incredibly practical and, frankly, very secular. Because the text redefines what a sin actually is. It has nothing to do with breaking religious commandments.
No.
A sin is simply anything you do, feel, or say that goes against yourself. Anytime you judge yourself, anytime you reject yourself or blame yourself, you are actively sinning against yourself.
And therefore, being impeccable with your word means committing to never using your creative energy against yourself.
It is a radical act of self-preservation, but it requires a deep understanding of interconnectedness. Because the immediate pushback people have is, well, if I get mad at my neighbor and I yell at him and call him an idiot, I'm using my word against him, not against myself.
Right, your logic says I'm attacking him, so I'm not sinning against myself.
Exactly.
But follow the chain of causality. If you call your neighbor an idiot, you are planting a seed of hostility. Your neighbor is now going to harbor hatred toward you. He might retaliate, or at the very least, he will project negative energy your way.
Which feels terrible.
Right. Is his hatred of you good for you? Of course not. It elevates your stress, creates conflict, and threatens your peace. Therefore, by sending emotional poison out into the world, you have ultimately used your word against yourself.
Ah, I see.
Being impeccable means aligning your word entirely with truth and love, because that is the only way to protect your own psychological environment.
The text gives some chilling examples of how this black magic has been weaponized on a massive scale. It points to Hitler as the ultimate dark magician.
He is the extreme example.
He didn't build the war machines with his bare hands. He used the word. He systematically planted seeds of fear, prejudice, and nationalistic supremacy into the collective consciousness. He activated the latent fear of an entire population purely through the hypnotic power of his word.
Manipulating millions of intelligent people into committing unspeakable horrors.
And that works because the human mind is inherently fertile ground for seeds. Information, opinions, ideas, they are all seeds.
And the tragic flaw in our current software is that because we were domesticated in the dream of hell, our minds have been optimized to be uniquely fertile for seeds of fear.
We soak it right up.
We are highly susceptible to negative bias. We absorb doubts and judgments instantly, while we tend to, reject compliments or positive truths.
I want to talk about a specific story in the text that illustrates this perfectly, and honestly, it broke my heart because it is so common. It's the story of the mother and the daughter.
Oh, this one is tough.
It really shows how we accidentally cast dark spells on the people we love the most. The text describes a mother who is generally a great parent, highly intelligent, deeply loves her daughter, but one day she comes home from a brutal day at work. She's exhausted, she's burnt out, and she has a massive pounding headache.
We've all been there.
All she wants is silence. But her young daughter is in a completely different dream. The daughter is full of joy, jumping around the house, singing loudly, and the singing aggravates the mother's headache to the point where she loses her temper.
She snaps.
She snaps, looks at her joyful daughter, and screams, "Shut up. You have an ugly voice. Just shut up."
Let's dissect the mechanics of that interaction, because it is crucial. Did the mother truly believe her daughter had an objectively ugly voice? No. No, her statement had absolutely nothing to do with the acoustic quality of the child's vocal cords. It was purely an expression of her own internal suffering, her lack of patience, and her desperate need for sensory relief.
But the daughter does not have the cognitive development to understand the context of adult burnout.
Right. The daughter only knows one thing. The giant God figure who dictates her survival just delivered a ruling from the Book of Law. And because a child's brain absorbs everything from authority figures as absolute truth, the daughter agrees with the word.
She accepts the spell.
And the moment she agrees with it, it is written into her own internal book of law. The text explains the devastating fallout. The little girl stops singing entirely. She becomes withdrawn. She develops a complex around her voice and her self-expression.
That's heartbreaking.
She unconsciously makes a new agreement. I must repress my joy and my voice in order to be loved and accepted. A single sentence blurted out in a moment of stress by a parent who genuinely loved her fundamentally altered the trajectory of her psychological development.
This happens all the time. Think about the offhand comments you received as a kid. You're bad at math, you're too sensitive, you talk too much.
If we agree with those opinions, they become our reality.
But the text doesn't just focus on the spells we cast directly at each other. It takes aim at a deeply ingrained social habit that it considers the absolute worst form of black magic.
Gossip. Oh yes, gossip.
And I have to say, the analogy the author uses here is flawless. He compares gossip to a computer virus.
It is the perfect modern parallel. I mean, what
Right.
is a computer virus? It is a string of code written in the exact same language as the rest of the operating system, but its intent is malicious.
Right.
When it is introduced into the system, the healthy codes begin to conflict with the malicious code, causing the entire computer to freeze, malfunction, and crash. Human gossip operates on the exact same neurological principles.
But I'm struggling with the virus analogy on one front. Nobody intentionally downloads a computer virus. We hate them. But people love gossip.
We really do.
We actively seek it out. If I go to a party, the quickest way to bond with a stranger is to find a mutual annoyance and complain about it together. So why are we so eager to infect each other?
Well, you've hit on the evolutionary dark side of our social bonding. In a fear-based reality, misery desperately seeks company. When we are suffering from our own internal judge and victim, we feel isolated. Gossip provides a cheap counterfeit form of connection.
So it makes us feel better.
Temporarily.
Yeah.
If I am secretly insecure about my own competence and I find out you are also annoyed by our coworkers' perceived incompetence, my ego gets a massive hit of validation. We bond over a shared threat or a shared target. It makes us feel safe, but it is a safety built entirely on emotional poison.
The text gives this brilliant, relatable example of a college class. Imagine you enroll in a new course. You are totally neutral, maybe even excited. But a week before classes start, you run into someone who took the professor last year.
Oh.
They pull you aside and say, "Oh, watch out. That professor is a pompous jerk. His grading is totally unfair, and honestly, he's a creep."
Now, observe the viral infection taking hold. You have just been imprinted with that person's specific emotional code. You've absolutely no idea what their motivation was for telling you that.
Sure.
Maybe they failed the class because they never showed up. Maybe the professor reminded them of their abusive father, triggering a massive projection. You don't know the truth. But because our brains are wired to prioritize threat detection, you accept the gossip as a protective measure.
So day one of the semester arrives. You walk into the lecture hall, and the professor starts speaking.
Mm.
But you're no longer seeing the actual human being standing at the podium. You're seeing a corrupted file. You are viewing him entirely through the filter of the virus. If he makes a joke, you interpret it as arrogant. If he looks your way, you interpret it as creepy. The virus actively distorts your perception of reality in real time.
And the tragedy compounds, because what is your next move? You turn to the students sitting next to you, who might also be neutral, and you whisper, "I heard this guy is a creep."
Oh man, now you are the carrier.
You are spreading the virus. Eventually, the entire class turns against the professor. The energy in the room becomes toxic. You end up dropping the class, and you blame the professor. But the professor didn't do anything. The gossip, the virus, destroyed the reality.
Expand this out globally. Imagine this virus spreading in a never-ending chain among 8 billion humans. We are swimming in a sea of distorted, malicious code. This constant, chaotic cross-contamination of opinions and lies is what the Toltecs call the mitote,
Yeah.
a marketplace of 1,000 different voices screaming in the mind, none of them speaking the objective truth.
And the only antivirus software available is the first agreement. Be impeccable with your word. It is a vow of immense discipline. It means you must become hyper-aware of what is coming out of your mouth.
You refuse to pass on unverified opinions.
Exactly. You refuse to speak against yourself, too. Think about how often you look in the mirror in the morning and casually cast a dark spell on yourself.
I look so old.
I'm so fat, I'm never going to figure this out. That has to stop immediately. When you commit to speaking only with integrity and truth, your mind physically changes. It is no longer fertile soil for the fear seeds of others. You develop an immunity to the virus.
Okay, so that handles the output. I learned to control the poison coming out of my own mouth. But I still live in a society. I have a boss, I have a family, I have neighbors. What happens when someone else decides to weaponize their words against me?
That's the next step.
How does this philosophy protect me from becoming collateral damage in someone else's toxic dream? This brings us to the ultimate shield, the second agreement. Don't take anything personally.
This agreement strikes at the very core of our domestication because it demands that we dismantle our own ego. The central thesis here is absolute and uncompromising. Nothing that other people do is because of you.
Nothing.
Nothing. Everything people say, do, and project is entirely a reflection of their own dream, their own internal book of law, and their own conditioning.
This concept of personal importance is fascinating. The text argues that during our childhood domestication, we are trained to believe that we are the center of the universe. We assume everything is about me.
Which is natural for a kid.
Right. But the author literally calls taking things personally the maximum expression of selfishness.
Because it requires unbelievable hubris to assume that another complex human being, with decades of their own traumas, beliefs, and biological programming, is acting primarily in response to you.
Yeah, that's wild when you put it like that.
If you are walking down the street and a complete stranger looks at you and yells, "You are so stupid," if you take that personally, you are making a massive logical error. You are assuming they know you.
And the text says that if I take that stranger's insult personally, it means I actually agree with them. I have accepted their emotional poison, and now that poison belongs to me. I have incorporated their garbage into my book of law.
Exactly. They are trying to hand you a package of toxic waste because their own hands are burning. If you don't take it personally, you simply refuse the delivery. The toxic waste stays with them.
That is a great image.
But the moment you take it personally, you feel offended. Your ego flares up. You feel the need to defend your beliefs, to argue back, to prove them wrong. You engage in a conflict over a projection that had nothing to do with you in the first place.
Okay, I have to push back hard on this. I understand the logic when it comes to a stranger yelling an insult or a boss being grumpy because they had a bad morning. But the text takes this to an extreme that I frankly wrestled with for hours.
Let's hear.
It says, in a quote, "Even if someone got a gun and shot you in the head, it was nothing personal. I'm sorry, but if someone harms my family or walks up and literally ends my life, you cannot tell me that isn't personal. That is the ultimate violation of my personhood."
I completely understand the resistance because it feels like the philosophy is invalidating the very real trauma of physical violence.
It does.
But the text is using this extreme, shocking example to force us to look strictly at the psychological motivation of the aggressor, not the physical consequence to the victim. Let's analyze the shooter.
Yeah.
A person who pulls a trigger on another human being is a person completely consumed by their own profound dream of hell. They are acting out of an overwhelming state of fear, delusion, rage, or sociopathy that was generated entirely by their own internal book of law.
So you're saying their motivation is completely internal?
Yes. In their distorted psychological reality, their movie, they are shooting a character that represents a threat or an obstacle or an outlet for their rage. The fact that you, physically, happen to be the actor standing on their stage playing that character does not mean their internal rot has anything to do with your inherent value or reality.
But it's still me getting hurt.
Physically, yes. But taking it personally implies that your actions somehow justified their madness. The philosophy isn't saying you shouldn't defend yourself or seek justice. It is saying you must protect your soul by recognizing that their evil is a product of their own sick dream, not a reflection of yours.
Okay, that actually clarifies it immensely. It connects perfectly to the analogy I was scribbling down while reading this. It's like every single human being is walking around with a VR headset strapped to their face.
Yeah.
They are convinced they're the star, director, and writer of the ultimate blockbuster movie. But the reality is, there are 8 billion different movies playing simultaneously.
That's brilliant.
When I interact with someone, I am not a co-star in their movie. I am just an extra walking through the background of their scene. If the director suddenly starts screaming at the extra, it's not because the extra is inherently worthless. It's because the extra didn't fit the director's arbitrary, deranged vision for that specific shot.
That is a phenomenal visualization. And what's crucial to understand is that this rule applies just as strictly to the positive things people do and say.
Wait, really?
The text warns us that even if someone walks up to you and says, "You are the most brilliant, wonderful person in the world," you must not take that personally either.
Hold on. We have to reject compliments too. If my partner tells me I'm amazing, I'm supposed to say, "Don't project your dream onto me."
It is not about being cold or rejecting kindness. It is about emotional sovereignty. When someone praises you, they are viewing you through the lens of their own good mood, their own positive agreements, their own current lack of fear. It's wonderful to share that joy. But if you take it personally, meaning if you use their compliment to validate your own worth, you are falling into a dangerous trap. You should already know you are wonderful. If you rely on their external validation to believe you are good, what happens tomorrow when they have a bad day and call you terrible?
If I give them the power to make me an angel today, I automatically give them the power to make me a devil tomorrow. It's
Exactly.
a pendulum. If I buy into the extreme highs of other people's opinions, I am defenseless against the extreme lows.
You become a leaf blowing in the wind of other people's psychological states. But the text takes this concept one layer deeper into a realm that can be very confusing at first glance. It argues that you shouldn't even take your own thoughts personally.
Now you're losing me.
Yeah.
How can I not take my own thoughts personally? They're being generated inside my own skull.
Well, to explain this, the author uses language that is steeped in Toltec mysticism. He talks about the mind operating on multiple levels and mentions the realm of the allies or the gods, suggesting the mind can perceive voices from other planes of existence.
Okay, stop. Let's pause right there. When the text starts talking about hearing the voices of gods or allies in my head, I know a lot of logical modern listeners are going to immediately tune out. Can we translate this mystical jargon into something grounded in modern psychology or neuroscience?
Absolutely, we can. Think of the brain not as a single unified consciousness, but as a massive, complex network of competing neural pathways and subpersonalities. Neuroscience refers to things like the default mode network, which generates our wandering thoughts.
Right.
In the Toltec framework, this cacophony is the mitote. Remember, during your domestication, you absorbed thousands of different agreements from thousands of different sources. Those agreements don't all align.
Oh, right. Part of my brain wants to wake up at 5 a.m. and train for a marathon, and another part of my brain wants to eat an entire sleeve of Oreos and watch television.
Exactly. And in the mitote, each of those competing agreements operates almost like an independent living entity with its own voice. They are constantly arguing with each other.
That makes total sense.
So when you hear a cruel voice in your head saying, "You are a failure, you are an imposter, everyone is laughing at you," that is not the absolute truth of your soul. That is just an obsolete, fear-based agreement malfunctioning in your neural network.
It is the judge reciting a line from a corrupted book of law.
Yes. Once you realize your mind is full of these fragmented voices, you realize you have a choice. You don't have to identify with the cruel thought. You don't have to take your own self-doubt personally.
That is unbelievably liberating. If I don't take it personally, I become completely immune to the black magicians of the world, whether it's a toxic boss, angry stranger on the internet, or the cruelest voice inside my own head. I am no longer a victim of the dream.
And achieving that immunity is essential because taking things personally is the exact trigger that pulls us violently into the trap of the next agreement.
Okay, how so?
We take things personally for one specific reason, because we assume we know exactly what is going on in the other person's mind.
Which brings us to the third agreement. Don't make assumptions. And man, if the second agreement dismantles the ego, this third agreement dismantles 99% of all interpersonal drama on the planet.
It really does. The text lays out the fatal sequence of human interaction perfectly. It goes like this. We don't understand a situation, so we make an assumption about it.
Huh?
Because we made it up, we instantly believe our assumption is the absolute truth. Reality inevitably fails to match our fabricated truth. We feel misunderstood and betrayed, we take it personally, and we react by sending emotional poison to the other person.
I am so guilty of this. Why do we do it? Why is the brain so eager to jump to massive conclusions rather than just sitting in the unknown?
It comes down to the brain's biological need for cognitive closure and safety. The human mind is an explanation machine.
It just wants answers.
It despises uncertainty because, in the ancient wild, uncertainty meant danger. If we don't know the answer to something, the ambiguity feels physically uncomfortable. So to soothe that anxiety, we just invent an answer. We create a narrative. And tragically, we would rather believe a terrifying negative lie that we invented than have the courage to actually communicate and face the vulnerability of the truth.
The text provides this great, almost comical example of the mall crush. You are walking through a busy mall. Someone incredibly attractive makes eye contact with you and smiles. That's it.
That's the objective reality.
Right, objective reality, a facial muscle contraction. But from that one smile, your explanation machine goes into overdrive. You make massive assumptions. You construct an entire fantasy. You imagine approaching them, dating them, getting married, having kids, buying a house.
You build an entire fictional universe based on a 2-second interaction.
And the comedic tragedy is what happens next. They keep walking, they meet up with their spouse, and they walk away. Your fantasy bubble pops. And your brain actually feels the sting of rejection. You get genuinely angry or depressed over the loss of a relationship that literally only existed inside your own head for 30 seconds.
It sounds absurd when you frame it like that, but I realized I do this at work all the time.
Oh yeah, let's use a modern scenario. You get a Slack message from your boss at 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. It just says, "Hey, we need to talk on Monday morning." Objective reality. A meeting is scheduled.
But the assumptions.
Immediate tailspin. I'm getting fired. They hated my presentation. I'm going to lose my health insurance. I need to start packing my desk. You ruin your entire weekend suffering over a fictional firing, only to go in on Monday and find out they just wanted to ask you about a software update.
We torture ourselves with phantoms. But where assumptions cause the most catastrophic damage is in our intimate relationships. We operate under this incredibly disruptive delusion. We assume that because someone loves us, they should be able to read our minds.
You should have known. That has to be the most dangerous, toxic sentence ever uttered in a marriage.
It is the battle cry of the assumption trap. A partner is furious that the other didn't do something, didn't buy a certain gift, didn't help with a chore, didn't provide a specific emotional response. But when you ask, did you communicate that you needed that? The answer is almost always, I shouldn't have to. If they really loved me, they would just know.
That is so unfair.
We assume that other people think the way we think, feel the way we feel, judge the way we judge, and abuse themselves the way we abuse ourselves.
I picture it like trying to build a solid brick house on top of an imaginary cloud. You spend all this time and energy building the house, the relationship, the expectations, the future plans, and you rest all of it on the cloud of your unspoken assumptions.
And then what happens?
The moment reality inevitably shifts, the cloud moves even an inch, and the entire brick house comes crashing down. And instead of realizing, wow, I was an idiot for building a house on a cloud, we get furious at the cloud for moving.
It's true.
We blame our partner for not living up to an agreement they never actually signed.
That is a phenomenal analogy. And the text reveals an even deeper, more painful assumption we make in relationships. It's the illusion of control disguised as love. We enter a relationship, we see a multitude of red flags, we recognize fundamental incompatibilities, but we make the ultimate fatal assumption, my love will change this person.
Oof. That one is going to hit a lot of people right in the chest.
It has to, because it is a devastating lie. The text is uncompromising here. Your love will not change anybody. If a person changes, it is solely because they have made the internal decision that they want to change.
Period.
Period. If you enter a relationship expecting to remodel the other person, that is not love. That is a hostile takeover. Real love is accepting someone exactly as they are without any desire to change them. If you feel you have to change someone for the relationship to work, you don't actually love them. You love a phantom version of them that doesn't exist.
So we have all this destructive behavior built on assumptions.
Right.
What is the cure? How do we stop the explanation machine? The answer seems so simple, but practically it feels terrifying.
The cure requires immense courage. The cure is to ask questions. You must demand clear communication until there is absolutely no room left for the mitote to fill in the blanks.
Just ask.
If you don't understand an email from your boss, ask for clarification. If you want a specific kind of affection from your partner, clearly articulate it. Acknowledge that everyone has the right to tell you yes or no, but you always, always have the right to ask.
Stop assuming. Start clarifying. If you eliminate the assumptions, you eliminate the misunderstandings. If you eliminate the misunderstandings, the emotional poison dries up.
Exactly.
The author even goes so far as to claim that if all humans could master this one agreement, clear, assumption-free communication, all human conflict, wars, and violence would eventually disappear.
It creates a perfectly clean psychological environment. But here is the reality check the author provides. Understanding these first three agreements intellectually is incredibly easy. You and I can sit here and say, yes, be impeccable with your word, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions. The logic is flawless. But maintaining them in the real world is agonizingly difficult because we are fighting against decades of deeply entrenched neural pathways and heavy domestication.
Right. I can be totally enlightened on this microphone right now, and tomorrow morning I'll be in traffic, someone will cut me off, and within 3 seconds I will break all three agreements. I will scream an insult, which is black magic.
Fair.
I will assume they cut me off just to ruin my day, which is an assumption, and I will get furiously angry about it, taking it personally.
Exactly. And the moment you fail, what happens? The judge wakes up, the victim starts crying, the cycle of hell restarts, which is why the entire system requires a stabilizing force. The first three agreements are the blueprint, but the fourth agreement is the engine that actually builds the house.
I like that.
It is the continuous action that eventually transforms these difficult practices into deeply ingrained habits.
The fourth agreement. Always do your best. Now, I have to admit, when I first saw this, my eyes rolled slightly.
Really?
Yeah, it sounded like something printed on a motivational poster in a high school guidance counselor's office. Just do your best, kids. But when you actually unpack how the text defines your best, it is a deeply pragmatic, almost revolutionary concept.
It is the ultimate antidote to toxic perfectionism. The crucial caveat here is that your best is not a static, objective level of flawless performance. Your best is a living, breathing, fluctuating baseline.
That is so important.
It is entirely dependent on your physical, emotional, and energetic state in any given moment.
Right. If I wake up after 8 hours of deep sleep, I've had a great workout, and I'm healthy, my best at work that day is going to be incredibly high output. But if I wake up with the flu, I've only slept 2 hours, and I'm grieving a personal loss, my best that day might literally just be taking a shower and answering 3 emails.
And recognizing that distinction is vital because it protects you from the tyranny of the judge. There is a profound danger in missing the mark in either direction. Let's look at the overachiever first. If you try to do more than your best, if you ruthlessly push yourself to meet a static ideal of perfection when your body or mind is depleted, you will completely drain your energy. You will invite burnout, illness, and resentment. In trying to do more, you actually delay your goal and damage the vessel.
But on the flip side, if you do less than your best,
If you consciously slack off, if you surrender to laziness or apathy when you actually have the energy to act, you leave the back door wide open for the judge.
uh-oh.
The moment you know you held back, the judge instantly enters the courtroom and delivers guilt, frustration, and self-punishment. The sweet spot, the only place where true freedom exists, is operating at precisely your best capacity in this exact moment, whatever that looks like.
There's a beautiful anecdote in the text that highlights the danger of the more is always better mentality. It's about a man who goes to a Buddhist temple to study with a master.
Oh, this is a great story.
The man is very eager to achieve enlightenment. He asks Master, if I meditate 4 hours a day, every single day, how long will it take me to transcend? The master looks at him and says, perhaps 10 years.
Okay.
The man, calculating that he can hack the system by just grinding harder, says, okay, what if I push myself and meditate 8 hours a day? And the master replies, then it will take you 20 years.
It perfectly illustrates the paradox of forcing the outcome. The man is completely confused, but the master explains the core philosophy. We are not put on this earth to sacrifice our joy for a future reward. We are here to live, to love, and to be happy.
Exactly.
If the man's true sustainable best is 2 hours of meditation and he forces his mind and body to endure 8 hours, he will become exhausted. He will become resentful of the practice. He will spend those 8 hours obsessing over the pain in his knees and his desire for enlightenment, completely missing the present moment. By trying to do more than his best, he sabotages the entire process.
So this brings up a very practical question. In our modern hustle culture, we are so conditioned to either grind ourselves to dust or completely check out and binge watch TV. How do I actually differentiate between truly honoring my best on a low energy day and just letting myself off the hook because my ego wants to be lazy?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because my ego is an incredibly talented lawyer. It can easily convince me, hey, you're a little tired today, so your absolute best is lying on the couch eating chips.
Well, the litmus test for whether you are truly doing your best lies entirely in your intent. And this is where the philosophy gets deeply transformative. Doing your best means taking action because you fundamentally love the action itself, not because you are expecting an external reward.
Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation.
Exactly. In the dream of the planet, humans are conditioned to only take action when there is a carrot dangling in front of them. A paycheck, social status, praise, a promotion. Because they are only focused on the reward, they actively hate the action itself.
Work becomes a miserable means to an end.
That is why they resist doing their best. They try to do the bare minimum required to get the reward.
Let's bring this down to a totally mundane daily task. Let's talk about doing the dishes. If I am doing the dishes purely because I want a clean kitchen, because I love living in a peaceful, organized environment, I am intrinsically motivated. I do my best to clean the plates, I enjoy the warm water, I listen to a deep dive, and I am at peace.
But if your motivation is extrinsic,
Right. If I am furiously scrubbing the dishes because I want my partner to come home, see the clean kitchen, and validate me with praise and affection, I am doing it for a reward. And if my partner walks in, tired from their own day, and goes straight to bed without noticing the dishes,
you're mad.
I am instantly filled with resentment. I am furious. Even though I did my best, I suffer because my intent was tied to an uncontrollable external reward.
That is the ultimate trap of the human condition. When you do your best solely for the joy of doing it, without any attachment to a reward, you actually begin to enjoy your life. And the most powerful psychological benefit of the fourth agreement is this.
Let's hear it.
If you honestly, truly always do your best in the present moment, your internal judge runs completely out of ammunition. If the judge tries to condemn you for a perceived failure, you can look inward and say, I did my absolute best with the tools and energy I had. When that is the truth, the victim cannot absorb any guilt. There is no room for self-punishment. You break the spell of domestication entirely.
Okay, let's take a deep breath. Let's pull back and look at the massive landscape we just traversed. We started this hour by recognizing that the reality we perceive is heavily obscured by the ancient, choking smoke of domestication. We looked at how our childhood conditioning programmed us with a rigid book of law, splitting our own minds into a ruthless judge and a suffering victim.
And then we were handed the specific tools to overthrow that internal regime. We learned how to wield our word as white magic, refusing to cast dark spells on ourselves or spread the contagious virus of gossip.
We learned how to put on psychological armor, becoming completely immune to the emotional poison of the world by realizing that everyone else is just projecting their own dream and refusing to take a single bit of it personally.
We learned how to destroy the false fantasies, the paranoia, and the interpersonal drama by refusing to build our lives on the imaginary clouds of assumptions, finding the courage instead to ask for the absolute truth.
And finally, we learned how to give ourselves profound grace, honoring our fluctuating baseline of best every single day, finding joy in the action itself so the internal judge never has a chance to bang the gavel again.
It is an incredibly demanding framework, but it is a complete, proven system for tearing down the dream of hell and consciously building a personal dream of heaven.
It really is. It takes all the power that society stole from you and places it completely, squarely back into your own hands.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. It draws directly from the prelude of the text. Don Miguel Ruiz mentions that deep down, beneath all the layers of domestication, we have memories of long ago when we used to be free and we loved being free, but we have forgotten what freedom really means.
We've forgotten what freedom really means.
So as you step away from this conversation and go about your day-to-day, when you inevitably feel a sudden, invisible restriction, when you feel a flash of social anxiety, a hesitation to speak your authentic truth, or a pang of guilt over something entirely trivial, I want you to pause. I want you to look at that feeling and ask yourself a question. Is this a real physical wall blocking my path, or is it just the ancient smoke of a bad agreement that I can simply choose to walk right through?